May 1st, 1945, Berlin. While Adolf Hitler's body was still burning, Martin Bormann was trying to escape from the Führer Bunker. But this story isn't about his escape. This story is about how Bormann systematically destroyed the most talented generals around Hitler, how he replaced them with loyal but incompetent generals, and how this accelerated the defeat of Nazi Germany. Martin Bormann was one of history's least known but most effective manipulators. The power of the SS was known by everyone. Himmler's name was whispered by all. But the real power was where nobody noticed, in the hands of the man who controlled Hitler's daily schedule, who decided who could reach him, who determined which reports would land on his desk. From 1941 onwards, as Hitler's private secretary and NSDAP chancellor, Martin Bormann was the only gateway to the Führer, and he controlled this gateway very carefully. Before starting the story, please hit the like button. It helps us reach more people with these forgotten stories. Subscribe, turn on notifications. On the Germany at War channel, we tell the real stories from the German side of the war. And leave a comment. Tell us where you're watching from. Now, let's get back to the story. Martin Bormann was a person nobody paid attention to. Overweight, ugly-faced, a party bureaucrat with no charisma. Unlike the other Nazi leaders around Hitler, Bormann never gave great speeches. He didn't excite crowds. He didn't even like wearing uniforms. He would just walk silently behind Hitler in his gray suit, carrying his files. But Bormann understood one thing. Real power doesn't lie in being in the spotlight, but in controlling the light. In 1941, when Rudolf Hess flew to Scotland and escaped, Hitler was shocked. One of his most loyal men had gone mad, had tried to make peace with the enemy. Hess's position became vacant, party chancellor and Hitler's private secretary. Hitler appointed Martin Bormann to this position, and this would mean disaster for Nazi Germany. Bormann's strategy was simple but terrifying. Control all information reaching Hitler. Determine the Führer's daily schedule. Decide who can meet with him. Filter which reports reach his desk. And most importantly, slowly poison everyone who has earned Hitler's trust. The first target was one of the Wehrmacht's brightest minds, General Ludwig Beck. General Ludwig Beck was the chief of the German General Staff, an intelligent, principled commander known for his strategic genius. In 1938, when Hitler wanted to invade Czechoslovakia, Beck prepared reports. He explained in detail that Germany was not yet ready for a major war, that a conflict with France and Britain would end in disaster. Hitler was furious, but Beck was right and could prove it. Military analyses, logistical reports, intelligence assessments. Everything supported Beck's view. Bormann watched this situation carefully. Beck was a general who could say no to Hitler. Worse still, he could support his arguments with logic and data. When he entered Hitler's presence, he could convince the Führer. This was unacceptable. Bormann set up his strategy. First, he changed the way Beck's reports reached Hitler. When Beck sent a report, Bormann would take it, prepare a summary, and present only the summary to Hitler. In the summary, Beck's strongest arguments were weakened, his most important data removed. Then Bormann began whispering to Hitler. Mein Führer, General Beck is worried again. I don't think he understands your vision. General Beck is speaking for the conservative wing in the General Staff. They don't want to see Germany's true power. Beck constantly sends negative reports. It's as if he wants us to fail. Bormann never directly said, fire Beck. He just planted the seeds. Slowly, doubt about Beck formed in Hitler's mind. In August 1938, Beck resigned. Official reason: health problems and strategic differences with Hitler. Real reason: Bormann had systematically isolated him from Hitler. Franz Halder replaced Beck. Halder was also a talented general, but not as principled as Beck. Halder preferred to remain silent rather than oppose Hitler. Bormann had found exactly the type of man he wanted. But this was just the beginning. Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox, the greatest hero created by the Nazi propaganda machine. But few know that Rommel's rise and fall were completely tied to Bormann's plans. When Rommel was sent to North Africa in 1941, Bormann supported him. Why? Because Rommel was geographically far from Berlin. He wouldn't be able to meet Hitler face-to-face regularly. All his communication would go through channels under Bormann's control. Bormann made Rommel a hero. He instructed propaganda minister Goebbels to publish news about Rommel. Rommel's successes were exaggerated. Even small victories were turned into major propaganda shows. Rommel loved this. Who wouldn't? The country saw him as a hero. Hitler spoke of him with praise. Rommel didn't understand how Bormann was using him. But Rommel's real situation in Africa was heading toward disaster. Supply lines were too long. Fuel, ammunition, food were constantly insufficient. Rommel repeatedly sent telegrams to Berlin. He requested more tanks, more planes, more resources. Bormann filtered these telegrams. The reports reaching Hitler's desk stated that Rommel was achieving tremendous successes. Resource problems were minimized. The difficult situation was not explained. Hitler thought everything was going well with Rommel. In December 1941, Rommel personally came to Berlin. He wanted to meet with Hitler to explain the real situation. Bormann prevented this. Mein Führer is very busy. The Eastern Front is in a critical state. Maybe in a few weeks. Rommel had to wait. When he finally met with Hitler, they only gave him 20 minutes. Bormann attended the meeting, constantly interrupted, directed the conversation. Rommel returned from Berlin without any concrete support. When the defeat at El Alamein came in 1942, Bormann immediately took action. He whispered to Hitler, "Rommel seems tired now. Perhaps Africa has become too challenging for him." Rommel's recent reports are inconsistent. It's as if he started making excuses. Perhaps Rommel is more valuable as a propaganda figure than as a hero. Hitler began to lose confidence in Rommel. In 1943, Rommel was recalled from Africa. He remained a propaganda hero, but his influence as a military leader ended. Bormann had achieved his goal. He had neutralized a brilliant, independent thinking general who could tell Hitler the truth. Erich von Manstein, arguably the most brilliant German strategist of World War II. The architect of the Sichelschnitt Plan that played a critical role in the fall of France. Bormann hated him. Why? Because Manstein could say no to Hitler. And not only did he say no, he could explain why he had to say no with logical, cool-headed military professionalism. During the Stalingrad crisis, Manstein proposed a strategic withdrawal to prevent the Sixth Army from being encircled. Hitler refused. Bormann labeled Manstein's proposal as defeatist and not believing in the Führer's vision. Manstein insisted. He tried to convince Hitler with data, maps, logistical analyses. Bormann intervened every time. Mein Führer, General Manstein, is skeptical again. He doesn't trust your decision. Before the Battle of Kursk in 1943, Manstein presented Hitler with a plan. Strategic defense, meet the Soviet attack, then counterattack. It was perfect from a military logic standpoint. Hitler, under Bormann's influence, chose a direct attack instead. Operation Citadel, the attack that led to the largest tank battle in history and resulted in a defeat from which Germany could never recover on the Eastern Front. After meetings, Manstein would tell his aides, "Bormann is isolating the Führer from reality. Every time he turns our military proposals into political manipulations." Bormann kept a file on Manstein. Every time he said no, every situation where he offered an alternative, every instance when he questioned Hitler's decision, he slowly fed this file to Hitler. Mein Führer, Manstein objects to your orders too much. Manstein acts as if he knows the war better than you. There are rumors among the generals that Manstein criticizes your decisions behind your back. In March 1944, Hitler removed Manstein from his position. Official reason: retirement due to health reasons. Real reason: Bormann had removed Hitler's most talented strategist from the system. Heinz Guderian, the father of Blitzkrieg, the genius of tank warfare. Guderian was the first general to see Bormann's manipulations, and he was the only one who tried to resist them. When Guderian became chief of the general staff in 1944, his first clash with Bormann came immediately. Guderian presented Hitler with a brutally honest report about the Eastern Front. The situation was heading toward disaster. The Red Army was advancing with overwhelming force. Germany should switch to strategic defense. Bormann attended the meeting and immediately interrupted. Mein Führer, I think General Guderian is seeing the situation too pessimistically. Guderian exploded. In the meeting, in front of Hitler and Bormann. I'm not pessimistic. I'm realistic. Someone needs to tell the Führer the truth. And what you're doing, Bormann, is isolating the Führer from reality. The room froze. Nobody spoke to Bormann like that. Bormann remained calm. He even smiled. General, we're all trying to protect the Führer's interests. But that night Bormann took notes. Guderian was now a target. In the following months, Guderian constantly tried to tell Hitler the truth. Every time, Bormann blocked him. He attended meetings. He interpreted Guderian's reports. He whispered to Hitler. In March 1945, Guderian clashed with Bormann again, this time about the defense of Berlin. Guderian proposed a logical defense plan. Bormann labeled it as defeatism. Guderian turned to Hitler and said, Mein Führer, Bormann is trying to make decisions on military matters. He's a bureaucrat. He doesn't understand war. But you're listening to him, not military professionals. Hitler became angry. Guderian, you cannot decide who I listen to. On March 28, 1945, Hitler removed Guderian from his position. Official reason, medical leave. Real reason, the last general who opposed Bormann had been silenced. Bormann didn't just destroy talented generals. He placed his own men in their positions. Wilhelm Keitel and Alfred Jodl, the two generals at the head of OKW, Oberkommando der Wehrmacht. On paper, the supreme commanders of the Wehrmacht. In reality, Bormann's perfect puppets. Within the Wehrmacht, Keitel was called Lackeytel. Lackey, and Keitel's name had been combined. Why? Because Keitel never opposed Hitler. He approved every order. No matter how absurd the decision, he would say Jahl, Mein Führer. Bormann had noticed Keitel very early. Keitel dissolved in the face of authority. He had no opinion of his own, or if he did, he couldn't muster the courage to express it. Bormann systematically supported Keitel. He praised Keitel in Hitler's presence. Mein Führer, Keitel is completely loyal to you. He never questions your vision. Hitler loved this. Who wouldn't want a commander who approves everything you say? Jodl was a bit smarter, but he also couldn't understand Bormann's manipulations. Jodl was a military professional. He was a good planner, but he didn't understand political maneuvers. Bormann found a way to keep Jodl under control, directing him by controlling the flow of information. The intelligence reports that Jodl used when making military plans went through Bormann's office. Bormann decided which reports would reach Jodl. Jodl worked with completely filtered information. Result: Keitel and Jodl told Hitler exactly what he wanted to hear. They never objected. They never offered alternatives. They just approved. At the head of the Wehrmacht were no longer military professionals, but yes men. December 1944. Germany's last major offensive. The Ardennes offensive, Battle of the Bulge. Hitler was planning this attack. The basic idea: break through American lines through the Ardennes forest, seize the port of Antwerp, split the Allies in two. On paper, a bold plan. In reality, a gamble that would end in disaster. All the professional generals knew this. Rundstedt, Model, Manschenfeld, they all opposed the plan. We have no fuel. We have no air support. Advancing in open terrain against American air superiority is suicide. But they were in Berlin. They couldn't speak directly with Hitler. All communication went through channels under Bormann's control. Rundstedt sent a report. He explained in detail the logistical impossibilities of the attack. Bormann presented the summary to Hitler. In the summary, Rundstedt's concerns were shown as minor hesitations. Model proposed an alternative plan, a smaller, more realistic attack with limited objectives. When Bormann presented this plan to Hitler, he added the comment, Model doesn't fully trust your vision. Keitel and Jodl, they sat in the meeting. Hitler explained his plan. Keitel, brilliant. Mein Führer. Jodl, it will definitely succeed. Bormann smiled. The attack began. The first days were promising. American lines broke. They advanced. Then the weather cleared. American air power came into play. German tank columns were destroyed in open terrain. Fuel ran out. The attack stopped. By the end of January 1945, the Ardennes offensive had completely collapsed. Germany had lost its last strategic reserves. Thousands of tanks, tens of thousands of soldiers, massive amounts of fuel and ammunition. All gone. The professional generals had been proven right. But nobody had listened. Bormann's power was based on a simple truth. Information control is power control. From 1943 onwards, Bormann controlled everything that reached Hitler. Appointments. If a general wanted to meet with Hitler, the request went to Bormann's office. Bormann decided who could meet when. Bormann would arrange Hitler's daily schedule so that before critical issues were discussed, the Führer was tired, stressed, or, at times, when his attention was distracted. If an effective speaker like Manstein was going to meet with Hitler, Bormann would schedule the meeting for late at night. When Hitler was tired, he would ask fewer questions, listen to fewer arguments. Yes men like Keitel would get appointments during the morning hours when Hitler was most alert. Reports. All military reports went through Bormann's office. Officially, this was a security protocol. In reality, it was a filtering mechanism. If a general sent a negative report, Bormann would summarize it. In the summary, critical information was softened, dangerous truths minimized. If a general sent a positive report, Bormann would present it to Hitler as is. Result: Hitler was constantly fed selective information. He thought the situation was always better than it really was. Meetings. When Hitler held a military meeting, Bormann determined who would attend. Critical, skeptical generals would be busy. Loyal, compliant generals were always invited. During the meeting, Bormann would sit quietly, taking notes. But at critical moments, he would interrupt. When a general asked Hitler a difficult question, Bormann, "Mein Führer, is very tired. Perhaps we could discuss this topic tomorrow." When a general was starting to convince Hitler, Bormann, "Mein Führer, remember, the intelligence report we received this morning said something different. There is no such report, but nobody could verify it." Whispering in Hitler's ear. This was Bormann's most powerful weapon. After official meetings ended, Bormann would be alone with Hitler. During evening walks, after meals, while having tea late at night, and he would whisper, "Mein Führer, General X seemed very hesitant today. It's as if he doesn't believe in your decision. General Y keeps offering alternative suggestions. It's as if he finds your strategy insufficient. I hear rumors among the generals. Some think the war can't be won." Hitler listened to these whispers. He already had a paranoid personality. Bormann was pouring gasoline on this paranoia. Bormann evaluated generals based on a simple criterion: loyalty. Military competence? Not important. Strategic genius? Not important. War experience? Not important. The only important criterion: unconditional loyalty to Hitler. Never saying no, never offering alternatives, never asking questions. The ideal general in Bormann's mind was as follows: implements every order without question, praises every decision of Hitler's, never sends negative reports, never expresses strategic concerns, attributes failures to external factors like bad luck or unexpected enemy strength, doesn't use personal initiative, just follows directives. Those who didn't fit this criterion, they were somehow removed from the system. Method 1. Slow isolation. The general becomes unable to meet with Hitler. His appointments are constantly postponed. His reports get lost. He's not invited to meetings. After a few months, the general realizes he's outside the decision-making mechanism. He resigns or is transferred to a meaningless position. Method 2. Trust poisoning. Bormann constantly whispers negative things about that general in Hitler's ear. The general is labeled defeatist, pessimistic, disloyal. Hitler's trust erodes. One day, Hitler reaches a breaking point and fires the general. Method 3. Setting a trap. The general is given an impossible task. With insufficient resources, unrealistic goals, inconsistent orders. The general fails. Bormann. You see, Mein Führer, he wasn't loyal to you. If he had been loyal, he would have succeeded. Why was Bormann's manipulation so effective? Because he perfectly used several psychological principles. Obedience to authority. Generals were trained to obey authority. Hitler was both the political leader and commander-in-chief. Resisting him was inherently difficult. Bormann used this nature. The rhetoric of "be loyal to the Führer" made every resistance attempt look like treason. Information asymmetry. Hitler could only access the information Bormann showed him. Generals didn't know what Hitler knew. Maybe Hitler already knew the truth, but had made his decision anyway. Maybe there was more information that the generals didn't know. This uncertainty broke the generals' resistance. Isolation. Bormann isolated the generals from each other. They couldn't act collectively. Each tried to resist Bormann alone and failed. One general didn't know what other generals were thinking. Maybe I'm the only one worried? Maybe the others trust the Führer? This thought weakened resistance. Gradual normalization. Bormann didn't set up the system suddenly. He built it slowly, gradually. In the early days, he was just organizing appointments. Then he started summarizing reports. Then he started attending meetings. Then he started giving advice to Hitler. Each step was so small that nobody noticed exactly when it became dangerous. Survivor bias. Generals who resisted Bormann were removed from the system. Only those who adapted to Bormann's system remained. Over time, the Wehrmacht's upper command structure was completely filled with people who wouldn't resist Bormann. There was no longer anyone left to resist. During the same period, a very different dynamic was operating in Britain. Winston Churchill also clashed with his generals. Churchill was also aggressive, intuitive, sometimes ignoring military realities. But there was one critical difference: Alan Brooke. General Alan Brooke was the head of the British Imperial General Staff. He was Churchill's military advisor, and he could constantly say no to Churchill. When Churchill proposed a crazy plan, for example, landing in Norway or opening up Europe through the Balkans, Brooke would directly oppose it. "Prime Minister, this plan is logistically impossible. Let me explain why." And he would explain, with data, maps, military analyses. Churchill would get angry. He would shout. He would argue. But he would listen, because there was no manipulator like Bormann around Churchill. Brooke could reach Churchill directly. His reports weren't filtered. He could speak freely in meetings. Result: Churchill's craziest plans were not implemented. Britain conducted a strategically consistent war. Around Hitler, however, there was Bormann, and the result was disaster. Albert Speer, Hitler's armaments minister and close friend, wrote the following about Bormann after the war. Bormann was the most dangerous man, more dangerous than the SS, more dangerous than Himmler, because nobody saw him. Himmler was a visible threat. Everyone feared him, but everyone saw him. Bormann was invisible, behind his files, in Hitler's shadow, but he controlled the real power. Bormann isolated Hitler from reality. He enclosed him in a balloon where he only heard what he wanted to hear, only saw what he wanted to see. And he systematically destroyed the Wehrmacht's most talented minds. Because talented minds ask questions. Bormann wanted puppets who didn't ask questions. When Berlin fell in 1945, the army command structure had collapsed. Because the real leaders had been fired years ago, only yes-men remained. Germany wasn't defeated by the Allies. Germany defeated itself. And Bormann was the architect of this defeat. Martin Bormann was one of history's most successful manipulators. Without any official military position, he controlled the Wehrmacht. Without holding any general's rank, he ended generals' careers. How? Very simply, by controlling information. He controlled what reached Hitler and what didn't. He controlled who spoke with Hitler and who couldn't. He controlled which ideas entered Hitler's mind and which didn't. And the result? Disaster. Germany's brightest military minds, Beck, Manstein, Rommel, Guderian, were destroyed. Puppet generals, Keitel, Jodl, were brought in their place. The Wehrmacht ceased to be a military organization. It became a political tool, and political tools cannot win wars. In 1945, Germany's defeat was inevitable. But the speed of the defeat, its severity, the completely unnecessary suffering, these are Bormann's work. Because Bormann removed talented people, hid the truth, and kept a dictator living within his own illusions. And in the end, everyone paid the price. Berlin was burning. The Wehrmacht had collapsed. Millions of people had died. And Martin Bormann, as he escaped from the bunker, was probably smiling, because he had won until the end. He had remained loyal to Hitler. He never lost the Führer's trust. But Germany had lost. History's lesson. The most dangerous person around a leader is not the loudest one. The most dangerous person is the one who stands silently at the door, deciding who enters. Whoever controls information controls power. And when power is in the wrong hands, empires fall. This story was told so it wouldn't be forgotten. If you liked it, hit the like button, subscribe. Write in the comments where you're watching from. On the Germany at War channel, we'll continue to tell real stories from the dark corners of history.